We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people. Because today, we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
Well, welcome, friends and fellow citizens, to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. I'm the host of this show. I'm also the president of the We the People Convention, and the We the People Convention is an organization that is funded by people like you, who are freedom-loving, liberty-loving patriots who want to affect, the government in a way that will improve our freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And so this show is sponsored by the generous donations by the people who give to the We the People Convention, and we thank all of them for their support. If you're listening on the radio, welcome to you. We are on the radio in Ohio every Saturday morning on a 5-station radio network. You can find out which stations and what times if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org. There's a big yellow block there that you can click on, and it will tell you, which stations we're on. It'll also talk to you about our podcast, which is available usually on Friday afternoon and then is up, all week long. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on our website. You can watch it. You can listen to it on iTunes. You can watch it on your TV on Amazon Fire TV and Roku TV. So pretty much you can get our podcasts any way you want, whenever you want, however you want, in audio and video formats. So we welcome everybody who's watching from not only in Ohio but around the country and around the world on our podcast. Whenever you're watching the show, thank you very much for joining us. This is if you're new to the show, if you're just turning this radio station or just tuning in the podcast for the first time, this is a news summary show. So what we try to do is look at all the news during the week and kind of sift through it, try to throw out all the noise and focus on the things that affect you and I personally. What affects our freedom, liberty, and prosperity, and then focus on those things. And unfortunately, for the last several weeks, that has been one thing, and that's the coronavirus. And I sure look forward to the days when we're not having to focus on that and we can talk about other things. But right now, we just have no choice but to do that. I want to open the program with a clip from the Tucker Carlson show, because the debate that is raging is, what is the truth about this coronavirus? And if you watched the podcast last week, I basically tried to make the case to you that the data that is now coming in indicates that this coronavirus is no more deadly than the regular flu. And I'm going to have more evidence of that for you today. And the second part of this is that, what is it that we have to do to protect ourselves from this? Because, as every year, about an average of 50 to 60,000 people die from the regular flu in the United States, and we don't shut down the government, and really you just take your normal precautions. You wash your hands. If you have a cold or you feel sick, you stay home from work. You do those kind of things. And with this coronavirus, we just went into a whole different world. And the question is, was that the right thing to do or not? And, my opinion is that it was not the right thing to do, that it was a mistake. And I said that last week. Well, now there's even more evidence to that, to make that clear. And so one of the main things that they've done is they've locked us down. They've said, the way to stop this is to lock the people who aren't sick, which is the first time in history that the people who weren't sick were locked up, along with the people who were sick, to try to prevent the spread of the pandemic. And, what you're going to see is, A, that didn't work, and B, the lockdown was not a good thing because it didn't provide any results. So I want to play a Tucker Carlson video, which I posted on the WeThePeopleConvention.org website, WeThePeopleConvention.org website. You can hear this whole video. I'm just going to play you a 2.5-minute clip here because it's important for you to kind of get this as a base to start the show. So let's hear what Tucker Carlson has to say.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, a little overview. Here's where we are as of 8 p.m. Eastern, which is to say right now. In many places in this country, Americans cannot go to the park with their children. They can't go to church. They can't have family dinners with their relatives. They can't go to the dentist. They can't get a knee replacement. They can't get married. Tens of millions of them can't afford to do much of anything right now because they're unemployed. But they'd better not complain about it. If they voice their complaints online, they're liable to be censored by the tech companies. If they complain in public, they could be arrested, and a number of them have been. The whims of our political leaders are now unquestioned law. Dissent has been banned, and that ban is relentlessly enforced by the willing stooges in our media who have finally stopped pretending they don't hate you. They definitely do. What country is this? Well, it's a country in a lockdown. We're told we have no choice but to do this, to stop our lives completely. Mass quarantines, they tell us again and again, are the only way to save lives. But that's a lie. They don't know it's true, despite what they claim. There is no scientific record to consult. It's never been done. We're currently living through the largest and most expensive experiment ever conducted in human history. We have spent trillions of dollars and crushed millions of people purely on the guess that a nationwide lockdown would save us from the coronavirus. Has it worked? Was the guess correct? Let's look at the data. That's where we should always begin. It's what our leaders should be consulting daily. Here it is. As of tonight, 8 U.S. states have not issued statewide shelter-in-place orders for their citizens. Those states are Arkansas, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. The question is, have these states suffered for not locking down? And the answer is no, they haven't, at least not yet. Currently, all 8 states are below the national average in coronavirus cases and deaths per capita. That's not to say they've been immune to the virus. They haven't been, but they definitely have not been hit harder than other states. In a recent article, journalist and professor Wilfred Riley did the math on this. He compared states that are locked down to states without lockdowns. He then performed statistical regressions that accounted for population, density, income levels, age, and racial diversity. He put his formulas right up there and challenged people to run the same numbers through those formulas or change them, come to a different conclusion if they could. No one has so far. Here's what he found. He found that a state's lockdown strategy had virtually no effect on how severe its outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus was.
So there you have it, and we're going to talk more about that study a little later in the show. But basically, the facts are now coming out that the states that didn't lock down, and if you've listened to this show in the past, I've talked about Sweden, which is the only country that didn't, do this lockdown stuff, did not shut down their economy. The facts are now coming in that they did not pay a big price for that. And this is bringing into question whether we should have these lockdowns. And if you listen to the Tucker Carlson full piece on our website, he closes with a statement that I'm just going to read to you here. At the end of this video, he says, "This is insanity. It's definitely not science. It has nothing to do with the public's health, much less the broader public interest. This is what happens when mediocre people suddenly find themselves with godlike power. That is a feeling of omnipotence, and they like feeling it. It fills an empty place inside. They don't want to give it up, and they want it to last forever, even as the country dies. But it can't last forever because it's not their country, it's ours." I thought that was a very powerful statement by Tucker Carlson to describe what's going on with these governors, okay? These governors who are just sticking with the old model, not looking at this new data and not understanding what's changed and just destroying our economy and hurting millions of people. The unemployment came out again this week. Another, I think it was 4 or 5 million people on unemployment. Now we're close to 30 million people in the country. And that's low, folks. I saw a thing that said 40% of workers are unemployed right now because of this coronavirus. We did this to ourselves. Our government, our leaders, our supposed experts and scientists and medical professionals did this to us. And the evidence is mounting that it was the wrong thing to do. And in Ohio, Our problem is that our governor and his dippy acting health director just cannot be transparent with the people, will not look at the real data that's staring them right in the face. And the data that's staring them right in the face came in a big way in Ohio, because this week it was shown that the prison system in Ohio suffered a tremendous breakout. One of the prisons, Marion Correctional Institute, had 80% of the inmates test positive coronavirus as of Tuesday. And so why is this important? Well, here's, they're talking about lockdowns, and they're talking about, how you do social distancing and things like that, right? Because you got to do that, because as you'll hear in a second, Dr. Acton says this is a very dangerous and a very deadly virus, right? So you got to do all these things that they're telling us to do as citizens. But in a prison, you don't have a lot of that, right? In essence, you're doing nothing. In a prison, you're next to people. This prison isn't a place where they're all in individual cells. There's actually these like dorm sections that have like 15 people in bunks. So the people are all together. And so this virus could just run rampant, kind of like it did on those cruise ships. Well, what happened? What happened at the prison systems here in Ohio? Well, there were 2,500 prisoners that were in the prison itself, and 1,950 of them tested positive, right? So that says it's a highly contagious disease. You bet most of the people got it. But here's the important part. Of those almost 2,000 people who got it, only 106 showed symptoms. Now, I don't know how many were hospitalized, but I know that 2 died. 2 out of 2,000. You know what that means, Dr. Acton and Governor DeWine? That means the death rate is 1 in 1,000. That's 1/10 of 1%. If you do nothing, no lockdown. And so why are we locked down? The flu has a death chance of death of 0.02%, almost double that. And so here's the evidence. You don't need to test everyone in America. You just had an exact test right here in Ohio, and they can't even see it. The fact of the matter is we are doing exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be outside in the sun and outside of the indoors, which is more contagious. And Governor DeWine made the decision, like a lot of governors, to end school this year, to not go back to school. That was the wrong thing to do. We need to develop herd immunity, because guess what? This virus has already been escaped from the lockdown and the quarantine. Then you'll see those facts coming up, okay? So we're just losing confidence. Well, we've lost confidence in our governor and in these medical professionals who could not be more wrong and who are destroying our lives in the process, and they aren't even apologetic about it. They're demonizing us because we're protesting, because it's like, well, how dare you protest? You want to kill people. Listen, they're asking people to commit economic suicide. They're asking generational businesses that have built up over 30, 40, 50, 60 years to shut down and lose everything simply because they asked you to do that. And when it comes time to, it's between whether I feed my family and I pay the mortgage, that's when I got to stop. That's when I got to step up and say, no more. You can't ask that of me. And yet they are. And then they're treating you like garbage when they do. It's disgusting. And the person who's most disgusting is the health director in Ohio, this Dr. Acton, for those of you listening around the country, who, as you will hear in the video clip that I'm going to play next, literally came out and said that she dreams of requiring ID cards. That would be a dream if we could make you all carry an ID card to prove that you have immunity to the vaccine before you could, quote, go about your business. Because of that, the We the People Convention issued a press release calling for the legislature to push Governor DeWine to fire Dr. Acton immediately. And we got a lot of feedback from that press release, and I can tell you that lots of people agree. Not only has she been wrong about everything, she's a hardcore leftist who's been taking her guidance on these models from left-wing websites and researchers who want to crush our economy. And it's outrageous that we are allowing our government and basically our state to be destroyed because this person who thinks we should all have ID cards. And so don't believe me. Let me play you the audio. Listen to her in the very beginning of this. She's going to say that this is her dream. She's also going to say that she thinks this is a very deadly disease. And there's a little clip after that that proves it's not.
No one really knows the answer yet to the immunity. As I mentioned yesterday, we would love, and a couple weeks ago, the big buzz was having a test that can show you had it. And almost in some countries, they're looking at certificates to say that, and then that you were immune and therefore kind of able to go about your business. And I think that would be a dream thing if we can get to something like that. But this virus is like your perfect science fiction invention. It is just that sneaky of an enemy. And, and we don't know how long people shed even after the 14 days. So it is a very infectious disease and very deadly.
Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is a Stanford University medical professor. He's been investigating the death rate from coronavirus, a fascinating and important number, and he joins us tonight. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on. What are you concluding about the real death rate, the actual death rate from this virus?
I think based on the evidence I've seen so far, it's likely orders of magnitude lower than the initial estimates. The World Health Organization put an estimate out that was, I think, initially 3.4%. It's very unlikely that it's anywhere near that. It's much likely, much closer to the death rate that you see from the flu per case.
So there you have this Dr. Acton saying it would be a dream to make you have an ID card to, quote, go about your business. And she's saying it's very deadly. And as I just proved to you in the Ohio prison case, it's not very deadly at all. And this doctor from Stanford who run this test that's really trying to find out what is the infection rate within the community, right? Because that's the thing we don't have in Ohio, because Dr. Acton and Governor DeWine are so incompetent, they can't get any testing done. The testing that the Stanford team did took 2 days and cost $200,000. But Dr. Acton and Governor DeWine in Ohio are talking about it taking 3 more weeks to do randomized testing in Ohio to find out, how widespread the virus is, so we can find out how deadly it is. Well, I got news for you. You don't have to look any further than the Ohio prison system. It told you the answer, and that's the reality of this. Now, as you can imagine, and I shared this Stanford study with you. If you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, you'll see, the videos there about this. The study, of course, is coming under criticism from the left, right? Because the left doesn't want to believe this. They don't want you to believe that this is not the worst disease known to man. They have scared the heck out of you, and they want you to stay scared. And so Dr. Acton is using those fear-mongering terms, right? It's an incredibly contagious virus, and it's very deadly. Yeah, it may be contagious, but it sure isn't very deadly. And of the 2,000 prisoners that got it in the Ohio prison, 1,900 didn't even know they had it. That's how terrible it is, right? So who cares if it's contagious if it doesn't barely make you sick? But of course, this study is coming under criticism, okay, because they want the Stanford guys to be discredited. And so there's people out there saying that the authors of this Stanford study owe us all an apology, because they claim that there were all kinds of flaws in the test kits, and that their statistics were flawed and their methodology was flawed. Okay, and so you can give that some credibility. I looked at this. Someone sent me an article and said, "Hey, careful about these Stanford guys. This is not looking like it's really a good test." But here's your proof, because in science you have to be able to replicate what happens. Right? In other words, some scientist has a theory, they test it, and then other scientists have to be able to replicate that before it can become unbelievable. So guess what happened? After a weekend of attacks on the Stanford paper, a study announced on Monday out of the University of Southern California on sampling residents in Los Angeles County instead of in Santa Barbara, where the Stanford test was, reached a very similar conclusion. It found hundreds of thousands of adults there may have already been infected, when as of Monday, Los Angeles County had only recorded fewer than 13,000 cases on their, the things they show you on TV. How many cases you have? They said they had 13,000. This study says they have like 430,000. The Santa Clara study, which Stanford did, concluded the virus had infected 2.5 to 4.2% of the residents. In LA, the estimated infection rate ranged from 2.8 to 5.6. That's pretty similar. See? But they don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that lockdowns don't work. They don't want you to know that that the death rate of this is less than the flu, and it is less than the flu, folks. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. So what are we afraid of? I should be wearing my "I am not afraid" button. I'm sorry, I forgot to put it on this week because I am not afraid. So there was a story that I came across that I want to share with you because it relates to this. And it says, after repeated failures, it's time to permanently dump epidemic models. The crisis we face is unparalleled in modern times, said the World Health Organization Assistant Director. Well, its Director General proclaimed it likely the greatest peacetime challenge that the United Nations and its agencies have ever faced. This was based on CDC computer model projections predicting as many as 1.4 million deaths from just 2 countries. So when did they say that about COVID-19? It's a trick question. It was actually about the Ebola virus in Liberia and Sierra Leone 5 years ago, and the ultimate death toll, when they projected it would be 1.4 million, was 8,000. With COVID-19 having peaked, the highest date was April 4th, despite the best efforts of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to increase numbers by first saying that any death with the virus can be considered a death from the virus, and then again this week by saying a positive test isn't even needed, right? So they're cheating on the COVID deaths. That's what they're doing, folks, to make it look like there's more deaths. They're literally not even dying from the COVID virus. They're dying from a heart attack. I got a lady who wrote to me and said they knew someone that got killed by a car wreck, but had the virus, and they put him down as a COVID death person, okay? You can see where this is going. Since the AIDS epidemic, people have been pumping out such models with often incredible figures. For AIDS, the Public Health Service announced without documenting, and this is Dr. Fauci's baby and Dr. Birx's, there would be 450,000 cases by the end of 1993, with 100,000 in that year alone. The media faithfully promoted it. Guess what? Instead of 450,000 cases, there were 17,325 by the end of that year, with about 5,000 in 1993 instead of 100,000. The point is, folks, they have never been right on this modeling, ever been right on this modeling. And they weren't right this time by worse than ever before. So why do we believe them? Why do you believe them? I said last week, if you get the coronavirus, 99.97% of you will not die. 99.97% of you will not die. Guess what? I was wrong. The Mansfield prison tells us that 99.99% of you will not die. And here's the final thing I want to leave you with, and this is also on WeThePeopleConvention.org. I put up a video. Mark Levin on Life, Liberty, and Levin on last Sunday night, had a doctor from the Stanford group, Dr. Ioannidis. And you got to watch this clip because it's pretty amazing, and you should watch the whole interview with Mark Levin. But this doctor said it looks like the death rate is only 1%, but get this, with an average of 3 comorbidities. Listen what I'm saying. This doctor says that studying the coronavirus deaths in the United States, the average person who dies from coronavirus has 3 other illnesses that could have killed them. 3, not 1, not 2, 3. And so he says that what's really disappointing with what our decision making that these governors are using and the president is using is that we're wrong on both ends. In other words, the denominator, how many cases are there? We're off by like 50 to 80 fold, right? Instead of 13,000 in LA County, there's 400,000. So we're way off there. And then we're wrong on the deaths because he's saying that the majority of these people probably would have died on their own within weeks, months, or this year. So our death count is too high. If that doesn't convince you this is a scam, folks, I just don't know what else I can say to you, okay? But I'm sure hoping this is bringing some information to you you haven't had that you can share with others and you can tell people to come watch this podcast. Because I'm not making this up. You can go to our website, read the stories, link to them yourself, okay? So we're going to get some more information as we go forward here. There's more going on. You're listening to the We the People Convention, a news and opinion radio program and podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski, and we'll be back after this break.
As Merrick, president of Liberty Camp for Kids in Portage County, Ohio. Liberty Camp for Kids is where students in grades 1 through 6 experience the founding of our nation. This year's camp will be held from July 20th through the 24th from 9 till noon. The cost is $30 per camper. If you're interested in our camp, being a volunteer, or even starting one of your own, go to www.libertycampforkids.com.
Buckeye Firearms Association is Ohio's #1 gun rights organization, protecting the rights of Ohio's 4 million gun owners. And you can get our weekly gun rights newsletter free. Receive breaking news and urgent alerts on gun laws. Stay up to date on self-defense and shooting sports. Discover pro-gun activities and events near you. Get your free gun rights newsletter now at bfanews.org. That's bfanews.org. bfanews.org.
All right, and we're back, and we appreciate you being with us. If you would like to donate to the We the People Convention, you can do that right now on your phone. All you have to do is text the word freedom to 22525, and we'll get $5 per month from you to help fund the show, to fund our efforts to protect and defend our individual liberty and freedom and prosperity, to help with our emails, to help with our travel, and help with us helping other groups around the state. So if you want to give, just text the word freedom to 22525 and you'll help us out. I'd really appreciate that. All right, I want to get on to our next story because this is an important story. Yesterday, I think it was, or maybe it was Wednesday, Attorney General AG Bill Barr basically said that he is considering the Justice Department taking legal action against governors who continue to impose stringent rules for dealing with the coronavirus that infringe on constitutional rights even after the crisis subsides in their states. Barr means to deal with the pandemic, such as stay-at-home orders and directly shutting down businesses, are justified up to a point. But he said in an interview Tuesday on Hugh Hewitt's show, eventually those states should move to a more targeted measures. He cited the approach laid out by President Trump. We have to give businesses more freedom to operate in a way that's reasonably safe. To the extent that governors don't and impinge on either civil rights or on the national commerce, our common market that we have here, that will have to be addressed. Very interesting. Very interesting. Because if you go to the WeThePeopleConvention.org website, you'll see an interview with Judge Napolitano, where he talks about the fact that these things that the governors have done, like saying you couldn't go to church on Easter, or that you have to stay in your house, or even that you can't open your business, there's no constitutional law behind that. These things can be challenged. And I expect them there be lawsuits going forward because this whole business of essential and non-essential businesses is prejudiced. What do you mean you're essential and I'm not essential? There's plenty of cases where, we have a thing called Joann Fabrics that was closed, but another company that sold, cloth and sewing material and stuff was allowed to be open for some ridiculous reason. Well, who's picking these winners and losers? It's too arbitrary. So what AG Barr is saying is that, as the pandemic starts to fade, you got to take these restrictions off. The governors don't have the legal authority to do that. And that's something that you're going to have to be looking at, because if they don't take them off, we're going to have to take action to defend our rights, right? That's what we're going to have to do. So we are starting to move into the open up stage. We have 3 Republican-led states are easing social restrictions beginning on Wednesday, leaving businesses to decide how best to safely reopen and operate during the pandemic without clear guidance from government. Decisions that come as right-wing protests pop up across the country against stay-at-home orders. South Carolina will allow some retail stores as well as flea markets to reopen Monday. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee said, with the vast majority of his state's businesses can reopen on May 1st, so that's a week from this Friday here. Georgia will permit businesses such as gyms, barbershops, and tattoo parlors to resume businesses today, the day I'm doing this show. Common among the states, though, is a lack of strict protocols for businesses to follow or a way to enforce a given mandate, even as health officials warn the virus could spread rapidly again if stringent restrictions on economic activity and widespread testing systems aren't in place. Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp has endorsed a free market philosophy which sees the business and residents, not the government, as having the ultimate power to decide how to proceed during the pandemic. Though the state did order businesses to follow social distancing practices and screen employees for signs of the illness, he said it's not going to be government that is going to solve this problem. It's the community at large, Kemp said earlier this month. Okay? So we're starting to move forward. And of course, the left is criticizing. And even President Trump went after the Georgia governor, saying he thought like tattoo parlors it was too close a personal contact. But folks, here's the point. We have proven to you in this show and in the previous week's show and the previous week's show that yes, this is a highly contagious virus, but it's not deadly, and it actually doesn't make like 80% of the people who get it sick, right? So now the left's big drumbeat to you is, okay, there's going to be another surge of this in the fall, and it's going to be horrible, and we should stay locked down until we have a vaccine. Number one, you ain't never going to see a vaccine. Mark my words. There isn't a flu vaccine that works. There still isn't a vaccine for AIDS. They promised that 20 years ago, okay? So waiting for a vaccine is a canard. 2, yeah, it's probably going to come back. So what do you want? You want immunity. That's why you send the kids back to school. That's why you start to open businesses, because you're not going to die from it. Understand? They're scaring you with lies. And when we close the podcast, I'm going to talk about that. I got a book I want to talk to you about, one of my favorite books. So here's what we've got. The problem we've got is, like in Ohio, there is no empirical evidence to suggest that we need to do this. There just isn't. And if Governor DeWine slow walks opening up our businesses, it's going to kill us. What these governors need to do, if anything, they just need to set standards that every business can adapt. They can't say, and this is what's going to happen in some states, well, we're going to open the medical industry, and then we're going to open up, maybe we'll open up gas stations. Well, they're already open, but let's say we're going to open up florists and garden centers, and then we're going to open up restaurants, but not bars. Well, you can't do that. It's illegal. You can't pick winners and losers. And the problem is, time is our enemy. We have to move quickly. Every single day, businesses that were open in your community are dying. They're reaching the point where they can't open again. Okay? All this stuff that governors and presidents have talked about, the Paycheck Protection Plan. I'm going to talk about that later in the show. We've got some better news on that. But most of the companies haven't gotten any of that money. And then the laid off people, there's 30 million people. They haven't even gotten their first unemployment check yet. It's been 3 weeks. It's going to be 4 weeks today. How do you live on that? We can't slow walk this. And that's what's going to happen. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to just be in serious trouble, folks. So what can you do about it, right? And I got to tell you, I've had just an incredible outpouring of calls and emails this week of people who are hurting so bad. And I mean, the governor, I answer my phone. I read your emails. I talk to these people. Governor DeWine's not talking to the lady who called me today weeping because her husband was in hospice and they wouldn't let her see him for 13 days and he died and she never got to see him. That's sick. That's what our government, that's what we as a society did. I talked to a young lady in Columbus who's a lawyer, and she just does work when she has work, so she doesn't have any unemployment. She hasn't had a check for a month. How's she going to pay her bills? This is real. This isn't a game. For all you want to criticize the people who protest, understand this. You're asking them to commit economic suicide, and the evidence I'm providing to you, is that they're doing it for nothing. You're sitting home getting your full paycheck, or you're working from home getting your full paycheck, or you're on Social Security getting your full paycheck. But in Ohio, there's like 2 million people. And across the country, there's like 60 million people who don't have a paycheck. And you think they should just suck it up? Well, what do you mean? When it comes to me feeding my family and paying my mortgage, I'm a good citizen, but you can't ask that of me. And then you're going to demonize these protesters? How dare you? How dare you? These people are Americans. They're heroes. So when people have been writing to me, they've asked me, what can I do? And so I'm going to go over that with you right now, okay? So the first thing that you have to do in Ohio, and I think this is for most states, the people that have the legal authority to curtail the governor, and in our case, the health director, is the legislature. So you need to go and call your House member or your Senate member and both, and just harass them. Say, I need to go back to work. This is all, it's not that dangerous. Yes, protect the people who have 3 comorbidities. Okay, protect the people who have obesity and diabetes and heart problems. But I don't need your protection. I need a job. Harass them. Be on their Facebook pages. Call them. Do not let up, because they're the ones who can come. In Ohio, they haven't even come into session, the cowards. The cowards. They haven't even come into session. They're supposed to represent you, and they're hiding from you. The second thing is, you're going to see that we're having a rally in Ohio on Saturday, April 25th. This will be our biggest rally ever. It's the Open Ohio Now rally. We're expecting to have at least 3,000 people there at 1 o'clock. Go to Columbus on Saturday at 1 o'clock, April 25th, and join this rally, because that's what you got to do. You got to stand up and let your feelings be known. As I said in my previous shows, it's not just a right for you to address your government and question what they're doing. It's your duty. And all you people want to criticize us? You don't understand the Constitution. Go read the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. It is our right to do this. And that's what we're going to do, and I hope you'll join us. The last thing you got to do is you got to get people to watch this podcast. So tell other people about this podcast, because that's really important. Because we're sharing information that's being blacked out. You're not getting it anywhere else. If you don't do that, how are they going to know? Okay? And the final thing you got to do, you got to get ready mentally and emotionally to do civil disobedience. Because if they will not open up your community, you're going to have to take matters into your own hands. We, the people, are going to have to say, we don't trust you. We don't believe you. The evidence doesn't prove your case. And we are going outside, and we're not wearing a mask, and we're not social distancing, and we're going to go to any business that's open. And I know some of you listening to this on the radio going, oh my gosh. Yeah, I am not afraid. This is phony as a $3 bill. The evidence is clear. Everyone should get this so we don't have a problem next year, because it's not going to kill you, and it's probably not even going to make you sick. Okay? So there's your plan. Call your House and Senate members, right? Come to the protest and set up a protest in your community or in your state capital, wherever you are. have people watch this show and get ready to defend your rights. Because when the government infringes on the people's rights, our only option is to push back. They work for us. We don't work for them. And we may have to make that clear, and you got to be ready to do that. All right, so I'm going to wrap up the radio show, right? The podcast will continue. If you're listening to the radio program, come and join us at wethepeopleconvention.org and pick up after the radio program and watch the rest of the show. We'll be going for like another 30 minutes or so. So we'll be happy to have you join us. And please tell others about this. And thank you for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with the podcast. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show. And my name is Tom Zawistowski, and we're sure glad that you joined us. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio, 44312.
The Buckeye Institute was founded in 1989, and we're the longest-serving free market think tank in the state of Ohio. My goal is removing barriers to prosperity that have been put in place by government. We want for Ohio to be the freest and most prosperous state in the country.
The Buckeye Institute is a source of common sense ideas that will have an impact on the nation as well as the state of Ohio.
All right. And thank you for being with us on the podcast. We really appreciate it. I want to talk about a couple other stories here that have come up and follow up on some things we've talked about in the past. I try to do that. I try not to just do a story and forget about it. I try to come back and give you an update on that. I do want to circle back to the beginning of the show when Tucker Carlson was talking about this study by Wilfred Riley, where he said there's no empirical evidence for these lockdowns. And he says comparing U.S. states shows there is no relationship between lockdowns and the lowering of COVID-19 deaths. That's what he says. And you can go to the wethepeopleconvention.org website and see this whole article. I'm just going to read you a little bit from it. Several weeks ago, one of the USA's better quantitative scientists, John Ioannidis of Stanford, and that's the guy I referred to you that watched the Mark Levin Life and Liberty show, made a critically important point. During the coronavirus pandemic, we are making decisions without reliable data, he said. As Ioannidis and others have pointed out, we do not even know the actual death rate for COVID-19. Terrifying and widely cited case fatality rates like 3% come from comparing known fatalities to the small pool of people who have officially been tested. Those test cases are mostly made up of sick and symptomatic people or those who have had direct contact with someone known to have COVID-19, rather than to the far larger pool of people who may have had a mild version of the disease. Because of the same denominator problem, we also don't know the true infection rate. A recent study in Germany indicates it could be as high as 15%. Finally, we do not seem to know the effectiveness of various strategies adopted by national and regional governments to respond to the disease, ranging from advocacy of social distancing to full lockdowns, because we just don't have the data. And this article tackles those questions, okay? So go read this article at We the People Convention. Fascinating. And he put his formulas out there and compared all the states and said, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Dr. Acton, memo, Dr. Acton in Ohio, try to prove him wrong. You can't, because you're wrong, Dr. Acton. He's right. I want to follow up on something that was important. 2 weeks ago, I think it was, I had talked to you that the American Policy Roundtable had filed a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request with the Ohio Department of Health, asking Ohio Dr. Acton what the formula was she was using to project the COVID-19 outbreaks. And so I thought there's a great move by them, and I followed up with a FOIA asking for them to give us the death rates by day of people who commit suicide, people who have drug abuse, people that have alcohol abuse deaths, all the deaths that are caused by the lockdown they're forcing upon us, right? We want to have a comparison between, we're trying to save lives for COVID-19, but you're killing more people doing the rest of it. Well, we got our answer. And here's our answer. There's a letter that I put on the screen on the podcast, but basically it says that in the law that the Ohio House and Senate passed that gave this Dr. Acton basically unlimited power to control our lives in Ohio, in that law, they put a block on FOIA requests so that you can't ask anything that they're doing until 90 days after the emergency is lifted. Can't make this up. And when we contacted legislators who passed this law, who wrote this law, this is the, let's see, what is it? I think it's the HB 197, Section 11B law, okay? Basically, they said they didn't know that was in there. They don't know how it got in there. But because of this law, we can't get them to tell us what models they're using, and we can't give them to tell us the data that we need as citizens to make intelligent decisions. That's how bad this is, folks. It's really sad. It's really sad. So the other thing I got to follow up to you, because again, this didn't work out. I talked to you about lawsuits, and I said we're going to start to bring lawsuits. And our friend Maurice Thompson at the 1851 Institute down in Columbus had filed a lawsuit that was with a bridal shop owner, basically saying that the order for her to shut down and destroy her business was prejudice. It did not contain due process, and that she shouldn't have to be shut down, and she wanted damages. And Maurice Thompson contacted me this week. They had taken it to a federal court, and the federal judge ruled that because Dr. Acton was acting according to a law that was passed by the House and the Senate, that she was actually legislating, not taking executive action, and therefore due process wasn't necessary. And so we don't know where we're going to go with this, but that was something we didn't expect to see. And so that case is now dead in the water, and we're very sad about that. So then last week I talked a lot about the Paycheck Protection Program and how we need to save our businesses. And the problem was that a lot of people were getting turned down. And so it turned out this week, there were all kinds of stories about big government, big businesses, publicly traded corporations getting millions and millions of dollars from the Paycheck Protection Program. And there's one that was, it's called Shake Shack that got $10 million and they're returning the money. And Harvard University got like $10 million and they're returning the money. And Trump and his people got all over all the big companies that took money and they're giving it back, okay? But here's the bottom line. The little businesses in the first $350 billion that was given out under the Paycheck Protection Program, lots of little businesses got it. 1.2 million out of 1.6 million were little businesses, but they only got 17% of the money. All the money went to the bigger companies. So in the next round, which they are voting on today, Friday, that I expect to pass is going to put like another $400 billion in, but they put some big provisions, like 30% of the money is going to go through rural and small community banks to help get the money to small businesses. And I will tell you that after I told you about my process where I went through and filed it, and then they said I didn't fill it out right, and then I corrected it, and then they said I still didn't do it right and was denied. Well, I contacted my bank and I said, you want me to reapply, but I don't know what I did wrong. Can you look at this? And when they looked at it, they said, oh, never mind. You're okay. You're in that pool to get processed with the next round of funding. My message to you, if you have a small business, don't give up. Call your banker. This money is for you. Way more of this next round is going to go to the smaller businesses. We must keep you alive. Don't give up. Stay with it, okay? Because this is the whole ball game, folks. This is the whole ball game. All right? So I think that's some good news. There's more money coming, and I think there's going to be more available to small businesses. So let's keep up the fight. We're going to take another quick break here, and then we'll be back with more of the show. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski.
This is Jordan Seculo with the American Center for Law and Justice. At the ACLJ, we are committed to fighting the deep state and protecting freedom, the right to life, religious liberty, and fighting for the Constitution. The ACLJ has experienced tremendous success in litigating cases at all levels of the judiciary, from the federal district court level to the Supreme Court of the United States. We have offices in Washington, D.C., Jerusalem, and all around the world. You can find out more about the ACLJ and join us by visiting aclj.org.
Did you know that the Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio is the largest statewide life group in the state? Are you tired of the compromised approach to pro-life legislation that has been the status quo for far too long? Since 2017, the efforts of the Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio has changed that approach, closing loopholes and making pro-life laws enforceable. Visit rtlaohio.org or call 440-668-4049 for details. The Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio.
All right, and we're back for our final segment. And back when we had a life, back before coronavirus, I had talked to you repeatedly about our main problem is equal justice under the law. And that if we didn't get convictions of the coup criminals, if A.G. Barr and John Durham did not uphold the law, that we probably couldn't win the election in the fall. And now lots changed, and I haven't talked about that story because, we've had more important things to talk about. But I'm really excited to be able to follow up with this right now and just play a short clip from John Solomon, who, man, this guy, and he's got a new website called justthenews.org. That's a really good news website where he's posting his stuff. But this guy has been on top of this from the beginning, and he's saying that he thinks there's going to be indictments. So I want to play this very brief clip with him and Lou Dobbs that'll give you some good information. Listen up.
Party of hate tried to accomplish, and to this point, no consequences. Let me take your temperature on consequences. Will there be any?
I think so. There is clear evidence, as I said to you last week, Lou, that there is activity, a criminal investigation that is now engaging in the sort of conduct that often results in indictments. It's going to take a while because COVID makes it a little tough to have grand juries, but there is real actionable things going on right now that suggest that two things may happen. One, there may be some indictments or some plea deals. And two, there's probably going to be another round of disciplinary action. And in between all that occurring, there's going to be more and more transparency, more declassifications coming out over the next 2-3 weeks. And we're going to understand just how bad this was.
Understanding just how bad this was is, man, we already thought it was pretty bad. So if it's even worse than we thought it was, my goodness, 3/4 of the federal government must have been involved in trying to steal our election and overthrow the president of the United States illegally. But I'm very excited to hear this. He talked about indictments. He talked about plea deals. And remember, when we talked in the past about plea deals, that means that they're going to get people to squeal. And go back, way, way back, and I said, McCabe. When McCabe lost his job and had his pension deferred and he was all angry, he said, if you put me in prison, I'll burn this town down. And I'm saying, please do. Please do. So indictments, plea deals, and then other action, meaning firing people, right, and getting clean in house and changing rules. This is getting good, folks. I think they're going to finally act. And John Solomon has been a skeptic. He said he doesn't really believe that he can trust the DOJ and the FBI to go after their own people. But the guy they're going to go after, I really believe this, the biggest fish is going to be John Brennan. I think John Brennan's going to see jail time. And that it couldn't happen to a worse person. It couldn't happen to a worse person, right? Because he's a terrible human being. He was a total leftist who went after Trump and orchestrated this. He and Clapper, Brennan and Clapper, I'm hoping are the ones that really pay the price. But I wanted to share that with you because that was good news in my book. Here's another story that's kind of interesting. Senator McConnell is saying that, of course, the Dems in these coronavirus spending, party that they're having is trying to put money for everything. Well, one of the things they want to do is they want us to bail out the states and local governments that are mostly Democratic, who've abused their financial situation by giving contracts to unions they can't pay. And Senator McConnell said that states should consider bankruptcy instead of a federal bailout. Senator Mitch McConnell said he would rather have states declare bankruptcy than have the federal government bail them out. Democrats are demanding billions of dollars for state and local governments under a $500 billion package meant for small businesses, hospitals, and COVID-19 testing. McConnell expressed concerns about extra funding that it would add to the national debt, but he basically said there's not going to be any desire on Republican side to bail out state pensions by borrowing money for future generations. So it's much bigger. So it's a bigger debt for them to handle. But that's what they're going to try to do, right? I mean, these pensions are grossly underfunded. I mean, there's pensions in some of these states that only are 38% funded. So there's going to be a lot of fallout from this, folks. And the governors that shut this down, that killed the economy, they were so stupid, they've actually killed themselves. In Ohio, we have a $2.2 billion rainy day fund. The Speaker of the House just said this week, it's gone. That they're literally already have spent more than $2.2 billion, and this pandemic isn't even over, and the tax revenue is shrinking, and your state and your local businesses, or excuse me, governments are going to be just screaming. And they're going to want us to bail them out. Well, how do you raise taxes on people that don't have jobs and businesses that are closed? They never thought this out, folks. They never did the math. They never looked at what the repercussions were going to be for these heinous acts. They were too busy playing God, as Tucker Carlson said in his video that I played at the beginning of the show. So that was crazy. Last thing I did want to mention too was, again, the consequences, right, that we talked about. Just to follow up, because we can't get information on suicides in Ohio. This information they protected because they don't want us to be able to make our case. But suicide help hotlines call Soar in Southern California over coronavirus anxieties. Financial stress, social isolation, health concern fuel explosions of callers seeking support. Teens hit particularly hard. In February, this call center in California, with 70 full-time staff members and 215 volunteers, took 22 calls on the suicide and disaster helplines related to coronavirus. In March, that number has soared to 1,800 calls, more than an 8,000% increase. And one lady talked about she had a guy on the phone that she had to calm down, who was anxious, who called about a week ago by getting him to focus on the here and now, and as she does with others in similar predicaments, like the woman in her 90s who hadn't eaten or drank water all day because she was upset about not being able to go to church on Easter Sunday and see her friends and family. That's what this is about. That's what the damage that's being done. That's the woman who called me, was crying, that couldn't see her husband because they wouldn't let her go into the hospice because of COVID-19. This is real damage, folks. This is not a joke. And so I want to close with a book review that is one of my favorite books. And you'll find it if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org and you click on the podcast yellow button. On that page, you'll see a little square that says Tom's Suggested Books. And this book has been on there for a long time. And it's called How Do You Kill 11 Million People? Why the Truth Matters More Than You Think by Andy Andrews. It's a New York Times bestseller. And this book, folks, it's got big print. Okay, I'll show you. It's got big print. It's literally only 100 pages, not even 100 pages. It's 84 pages. You can read this book in one evening easily, and it will change your life. It changed my life. This book is by this historian, American historian, Andy Andrews. And he talks about the reason he wrote the book was because as a little boy, as he was growing up and studying history, he saw the pictures of the Jews with their children and their luggage going up the ramps into cattle cars. And there were thousands of Jews. And there were just literally a few German guards. And he couldn't understand why the Jews didn't fight and run away. Why did they go in the cattle cars? And in this book, he explains why. And the answer to the question, how do you kill 11 million people? You know what the answer to that question is? You lie to them. That's how you kill 11 million people. In World War II, the Germans went to the Jews and they said to them, the Russians are going to kill you and we're going to protect you. So in the Warsaw Ghetto, they started to put fence around the ghetto. And they told the Jews they was there to protect them. And then they started to build a wall. And if you go there to Warsaw and look at the remnants, the wall was so high that eventually they couldn't see out of it. And the Jews tried to bribe the generals, to see if they were on the level, and they wouldn't take the bribe. They assured them they were there to protect them. And so the way they killed 11 million Jews is they told them that the Russians were getting too close and they need to move them to a safer place. And they couldn't bring any of their belongings with them, just a suitcase and their children and their husbands and their wives, and that their husbands would have good jobs and their children would have good schools. Just get on the cattle cars and we'll take care of you. And they took them to the ovens and they killed them. This is what our government is doing to us today. There's 11.6 million people in Ohio. How do you kill 11.6 million people? You tell them that there's a disease that is the worst disease known to mankind, that is deadly. And if you get it, you won't survive. So go in your house, give up your business, give up your job, be afraid, do whatever I tell you what to do. Lies. They're all lies. Go get this book, How to Kill 11 Million People by Andy Andrews. It's probably like $8 on Amazon. It'll change your life and you'll share it with everyone you know. We're in a tough fight, folks. We must get our economy going. There is not enough money in the world to bail us out if we don't get back to work. And we can't get back to work if we don't stop scaring the heck out of people. We have to change the narrative. President Trump has to stop calling it a plague. President Trump has to stop saying that 2 million people would have died if we did nothing. If that was true, President Trump, how come we didn't have 400 people dead in the Ohio prison? How come we had 2 out of 2,000 with no precautions? How come they're not dead in Sweden? It's a lie. Quit scaring people. Governor DeWine, quit saying this is an invisible monster lurking out there that will kill you. It's not. It's a flu. And we can't be afraid, because if we're afraid, we won't go to restaurants and theaters and gyms and do the things we need to have a capitalist economy. And we won't anymore. We'll have a socialist economy, which you're living in right now. How do you like it so far? Stand up, my fellow Americans. Stand up right now. Go to the rally in Columbus on Saturday or any other day next week and get ready for civil disobedience, because we have no other choice. I greatly appreciate you watching the show, listening on the radio. I hope you will tell others about this podcast. I hope you will spread the news. Please go to WeThePeopleConvention.org. Make sure you're getting my emails. Send me emails at info@WeThePeopleConvention.org. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me what I'm doing, what I should be doing. This is about all of us, folks. We're in this together. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski, and I am not afraid, and I will never give up my freedom, my liberty, and my prosperity, ever. Have a good week.